Good morning and welcome to Rising. We've got a great show for you today as we say goodbye 2025 and hello 2026.
Time flies when you're having fun, Robbie, does it not?
It does not, and we are having fun. You know, it's been a great year overall for me and for Rising, and a lot of happy memories, a lot of good things to look back on. Moved into these new digs. I think that happened last year. I'm starting to lose track of time. I've been doing this show for 5 years.
So long. Feels like an eternity, Robbie.
It feels like an eternity, but I'm happy to spend eternity with you,
well, likewise, it's all,
and with Lindsay and with all our fine staff here.
It has all been a pleasure. So we've had a good time.
Yes.
Meanwhile, Time Magazine has named the architects of artificial intelligence collectively as its Person of the Year for 2025. Sam Jacobs, Times editor-in-chief, writes, Person of the Year is a powerful way to focus the world's attention on the people that shape our lives. And this year, no one had a greater impact than the individuals who imagined, designed, and built AI. For these reasons, we recognize a force that has dominated the year's headlines for better or for worse.
Now, one of the two covers that Time commissioned for the issue featured 8 AI leaders sitting on the famous 1932 photograph, lunch atop a skyscraper. AI leaders include Mark Zuckerberg of Meta, Elon Musk of X, Jensen Huang of NVIDIA, Sam Altman of OpenAI, Lisa Su of Advanced Micro Devices, Demis Haspis of Google DeepMind Technologies, Dario Amodei, sorry if I'm mispronouncing some of these, of Anthropic, and Fei Li of Stanford's Human-Centered AI Institute.
AI has grown rapidly as an industry in the past year, and the tone was set in January's inauguration of President Trump.
Many tech titans visited Washington in 2025. Some even sat behind the president during his inaugural address, signaling the power that they wield.
While Americans are increasingly using artificial intelligence in their daily lives, a recent Pew Research poll showed that about half of the respondents say that AI is more likely to erode than improve people's ability to think creatively and form meaningful relationships.
Person of the Year is one of Time's most recognizable franchises. Past winners include then-President-elect Donald Trump, pop star Taylor Swift, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, and Tesla Chief Executive Elon Musk. I love a good Time Person of the Year gimmick.
I know it's a favorite of yours.
Oh, I do. Remember
title.
When you won and I won
yes,
and you won.
We all won.
I love that gimmick.
Many years ago now.
Yes, many years ago now, when it was the reflective cover.
That's right.
I'm a sucker for a good gimmick. So this isn't gimmicky enough.
Okay.
Because it would have been fun if they named the AI itself the Person of the Year, like ChatGPT or Grok or something.
Okay, yeah.
And then we got, but it's not a person.
And then we have a whole debate about that.
That whole debate. So we're not having that debate because it's the Sam Altman and Elon and Zuckerberg and all those people.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I agree they're a perfectly worthy choice. This was the year that AI went from a kind of discussed concept in the future to something we're living with and finding new uses for, and the technology is only going to accelerate from here. So I think the choice is solid. I don't argue with it.
Yeah, there's no question at all that AI is perhaps the biggest story, certainly one of the biggest stories in the world, and I think is going to continue to be that. I don't really think the political world, which is our sort of bread and butter, has really grappled completely with the implications of it all. I think there's going to be a lot more debates about regulation, about how you deal with potential job losses from AI and all of that. As far as the Time cover is concerned, I didn't particularly love that. I know it's a play on AI in a way, but putting those guys, and one woman, I think, on the famous photo, just because the original photo, of course, is very famous and a sort of a homage of a kind to the working man. And now we have all these sort of oligarchs, as Bernie Sanders would say, atop it, and I don't really love that part of it.
People, according to that poll we showed, are very wary of AI. I'm an AI enthusiast. I'm always trying to...
You're a technology enthusiast, generally speaking, though.
Well, I just think that whenever you have this view that the technology is bad or harmful, they've always had those, every time. something new comes along. They've said, I repeat myself, but they said it about television. They said it about video games. They said it about the radio. Always the people bought into the, and then especially from a media perspective, you have people who, you have media institutions that make their money off the current thing or warning about how bad the next thing is going to be. There's so much, newspapers cast so much suspicion onto radio when radio was the disruptive technology vis-a-vis newspapers. And so I read a lot of, for instance, the New York Times tech coverage. I often find to be very fear-mongering-y. It was or that way about social media, because social media is evading the kind of gatekeeping that large media institutions were able to do previously. So it's a self-interested skepticism that they're foisting on you that you have to be aware of. That doesn't mean there will be no downsides or no challenges because of AI. Yes, it's going to transform the job market. Yes, I talked in a radar recently about Bernie wants to put a moratorium on data centers. I think that's a terrible idea, but if data centers are negatively impacting a community that they're present in, well, then we have to find way. I don't want the people to have to pay higher energy or higher water prices because there's a data center. We got to make the tech company do that. We got to make Sam Altman and Elon Musk do that, so it's not harming you. But the technology itself is more likely than not going to improve your life in ways that you can't even comprehend.
So I agree that there is sometimes too much of a tendency to have a knee-jerk resistance to technological change. And also whether we think it has downsides and they outweigh the upsides or not, it is to some extent an unstoppable force. I mean, you mentioned the media industry. I am old enough to remember a time when people in the print industry were disparaging of the internet, full stop. It's a passing fad. It's not going to amount to anything. And that didn't work out so well for them. And it's also just unarguable, for example, that in the news business, the business of the written word, the digital world allows news to be delivered instantly to people wherever they are. The process of creating a newspaper is a laborious and time-consuming way to do it, and is therefore an inferior delivery system. That being said, there are obviously genuine downsides to almost all technological developments. I mean, I think it is almost unarguable that the rise of social media has coincided with a reduction in attention span kind of capacities. That's certainly my impression from just my own life, my own experience, and looking at people of a younger generation as well, including my daughter, who never listens to an album all the way through, listens to like maybe the first minute of a song, and if she really loves it, she'll listen to the whole song. But the art of the album is lost, I think. But that's a different lament to have.
Yeah, ways it's impacting, our attention spans, our entertainment. Too many television shows now, they just expect that people aren't actually watching it. They've got it on.
Second screen, so to speak.
Right,
Yeah.
so they're like all constantly telling you what's going on to remind you in case you weren't paying attention, and that annoys me. I think we can be a little bit more demanding of people that they pay attention to what's going on.
We don't want the bigotry of low expectations, as George Bush used to say.
Correct.
In a different context. Up next, we'll take a look at which states are set to raise their minimum wage in the new year. Stay with us. As we look ahead to the new year, the cost of living continues to be a top concern for many Americans. For lower income workers in particular, this time of year is important because it's often when their state increases its minimum wage.
And in 2026, that will be the case for nearly half of all states. According to reporting from Nexstar Media's Addie Bink, 22 states will increase their minimum wage at some point in the new year. This map, which she put together for the Hill's website, shows all the states in question. States in green are set to raise the wage on January 1st. The states in yellow, Alaska, Florida, and Oregon, will have delayed increases that go into effect later in the year.
The increases in wages are mostly incremental. They're just really keeping up roughly with the rate of inflation. But there are a few notable outliers. Hawaii's minimum wage will rise by a full $2 per hour from $14 to $16. Nebraska is going up by 10% from $13.50 to $15. And Robbie's home state of Michigan will be going from $12.48, very specific, to an equally specific $13.73.
The state with the highest minimum wage is technically Washington State, which will increase its wage to just over $17 in the new year. but actually the District of Columbia has a higher minimum wage than any of the 50 states. It's currently $17.95. D.C. will not be changing that number in 2026.
If you're wondering about the federal minimum wage, that's not changing either. It will stay at $7.25 an hour. That's the same level it's been at since 2009. Democratic Congressman Al Green and Republican Senator Josh Hawley both introduced separate bills in 2025 that would have raised the federal minimum wage, but neither bill has, at least so far, made it to the floor for a vote.
I presume you would like to raise the federal minimum wage.
I think it's absurd that it's so low.
Well, but again, I would say what I always say about this, which is that I don't know what your purchasing power is so different state by state, well, even city by city. So that's when it starts to get complicated. That could be, I mean, that's a pretty low wage, I think, basically anywhere.
Well, that's the thing.
But, you know, I don't know, in rural Missouri, that might not be such a low wage. In D.C., that would be, it's not even, it wouldn't even be a wage. There's no one who you could employ at that amount. So I don't see how we could possibly have a one, size-fits-all wage policy across the. Then it gets additionally confusing because for some kinds of jobs, you can do it remotely. You can live somewhere that's cheaper and have the higher wage if it's a firm in a city and live elsewhere. That's when you get the really good deal.
So I take the point, at least in an abstract sense, that you can't have a one-size-fits-all. But the purpose of a federal minimum wage, I would argue, is not to have one size fitting all. It's to have a floor as a basic level around which any other state can raise it further. I mean, we were just mentioning the fact that here in the District of Columbia, the minimum wage is higher than anywhere else and way higher, more than double the federal minimum wage. But even if you're living in rural Missouri or rural Mississippi, $7.25. I mean, this is something that we decided in 2009 was an acceptable floor for wages. We could calculate out, I'm sure, how much $7.25 in 2009 dollars is now worth, even if it had kept pace with inflation. It would be much greater, which just finally, I mean, that's my overall point about the federal minimum wage. It should be inflation linked, so it just goes automatically up to keep pace with cost of living increases.
I mean, fair enough. It might very well be the case that if you're going to do it, it should be inflation linked so that the number isn't just meaningless. Otherwise, I'm not for a minimum wage at all. I would get rid of all of the minimum wage laws because, this is a kind of standard right versus left argument that's been argued to the end of time. And economists disagree and will point to research saying that it negatively impacts the labor market. Then there's other research saying it doesn't affect employment. Then there's more research saying it does. It's why you can't just say, well, what do the experts say? Well, the experts strenuously disagree because there's research that they've been doing for 50 years, and some research shows one way and some says the other. People of my ideological thinking will say, well, the effective minimum wage is zero. Mm-hmm. If you obligate an employer to pay someone more than the employer thinks their labor is worth, then they just will not pay them to do that job at all, and they'll have someone else who works at the firm do that job. Now, in some firms where there's some huge profit margin, they can afford to absorb more of that, and if you make them pay their employees more, they can afford to do that. But a lot of firms, a lot of industries actually have very low profit margin. They have huge profits, but they have low profit margins. They can't or just are unwilling to absorb those costs, so they'll automate or they'll do something else.
I'll respond to that argument in a second, but I think your passion against the minimum wage caused you to flick off the cap of your pen at some point there.
Did I throw it at you?
It should have been a rare rising slow motion instant replay of that to see it in full effect.
I missed that. Well, this time I did not throw it at you out of anger.
Well, that's good. I feel privileged in that respect.
You feel safe.
Yes. To the point about minimum wage and the overall sort of philosophical arguments about it. I know that this is a big sort of philosophical difference you and I have. My argument always with the thesis you have just outlined is that I think it just hands too much power to businesses to do what they like and to, in a sense, band together, officially or unofficially, to extract labor at an unfairly low cost. It is true, of course, that the higher wages rise, the higher labor costs rise, prices often have to keep pace with that. But we do, I think, have a legitimate societal obligation in ensuring that people who are working full-time jobs are getting sufficient money to live and to take care of basic necessities.
I think if I agreed to that, I would nevertheless want to fulfill that obligation via a different means, via some kind of universal basic income or some kind of just cash payments from the government, which so that's from taxpayer money, but the transfer being done that way via. I tend to find putting obligations on businesses, like how you run your business, creates economic inefficiencies for those firms. So I would rather, if we're going to do this, I would rather just more directly confiscate more of their wealth and then redistribute. Again, I'm not for this, but of the plans to make it more equitable or make people have more, I would rather do it that way than say, oh, this is exactly how much you can pay this person in these circumstances, because that gets in the way of them operating their businesses efficiently. Let them do whatever they want, and also can accelerate trends that pro-labor groups think are bad, like automating, you say, well, we'll just, or mom and pop stores going out of business. You know, the smaller guys are the ones that have a harder time paying increased labor costs, whereas there's Walmart has been in support of doing this because it clears out all the competitors, and then they'll raise their prices overall because they don't have competitors. They can afford to pay their employees more. So instead of doing that, we do, everybody who makes under whatever just gets a check for $25,000 a year, something like that. We do it that way rather than say, you get paid this much if you're this or this or this, because then it gets more. The more confusing it is, the worse it is.
Well, that element may be true. I struggle to see the injustice or unfairness in demanding or requiring businesses to pay a certain wage to their employees. Now, it is true that there are regional and city-to-city differences in cost of living, of course, and the market does have some role to play in that respect. But again, it comes down to the putting a baseline under things and not allowing the forces of corporatism, essentially, to tilt the playing field excessively in their direction by removing any kind of restraining regulation.
I also worry, and I know we got to go, I also worry about the effect that higher minimum wage or higher labor requirements to protect the existing worker pool negatively impacts younger workers. It basically shields them from competition, people who are inexperienced, who you might bring on, but you'd pay less. That's actually an advantage if you're starting out that, well, you don't have to pay me as much and give me a shot. And we're saying, well, I'd like to, but the law says I can't. And I don't like that.
No, I mean, it's a debate we'll return to, I'm sure. Oxford University Press and Merriam-Webster announced their 2025 words of the year. We'll tell you next what they are. Don't go anywhere. It really is another year of the internet. Merriam-Webster announced their 2025 word of the year, and that word is slop. Slop refers to digital content of low quality that is produced usually in quantity by means of artificial intelligence. This can include videos, images, fake news, books, and propaganda. Merriam-Webster writes on its website, the word slop sends a little message to AI when it comes to replacing human creativity. Sometimes you, AI, don't seem too super intelligent.
Also, the Oxford University Press chose ragebait as their word, which is online content deliberately designed to elicit anger or outrage by being frustrating, provocative, or offensive, typically posted in order to increase traffic to or engagement with a particular web page or social media account. We would never engage in rage baiting here at Rising. No. Now, these terms highlight how technology, amplified by AI, just what we were talking about, is changing online discourse and culture. Slop. Are you confronted with a great deal of slop in your social media behavior?
I mean, I think it is increasing in volume as AI takes more of a hold. We were talking about AI earlier. I do think that there is this sort of increase in I mean, it's a good word because it describes what is, I think, a relatively new phenomenon or a relatively new trend of this sort of cheaply constructed material that increasingly bedevils social media feeds, which has, it's kind of empty calories, right? It's the fast food of the digital discourse world.
Sometimes it's empty calories. I don't want to. I sound like I'm in cahoots with the robots today.
Yes.
But I'm like the Gaius Baltar figure on Battlestar Galactica. If anyone remembers that reference.
You're not being sponsored by ChatGPT or OpenAI.
My head is going to open up, and I'm going to reveal that I am
the logo, a bot.
But no, I was just looking. Oh, what's going on? We're doing some. They're playing some stuff while I'm talking.
Yes.
I was looking at Instagram before we were getting started. And yeah, there's some slop, some bad AI that's just distracting, wasting my time. But I've also seen a lot lately of Lord of the Rings, which I'm a huge fan of. AI renderings of scenes from the Silmarillion, which is the backstory of the elves, and just these beautiful images of I was just seeing Turgon crossing the mountains during the journeys of the Noldor, and this is something that's never been filmed and maybe never will be filmed, and it's beautiful to behold. I've seen a lot of Star Wars content that I've really liked that actually is perfectly fine and in some ways better than some of the Star Wars content that has been put out by Disney in recent years.
Really?
So some of this has creative value and merit in my view.
Maybe. Talking of things that have merit, I want to speak up on behalf of the Oxford University Press over those Americans at Merriam-Webster, because I think ragebait is actually, I would vote for ragebait over slop as word of the year. Because firstly, because ragebait just annoys me more, as the name would suggest, but also because I think it is increasingly a problem where people, especially on online spaces, are just putting forth more and more ludicrous views that they know to be inflammatory as a way to drive engagement.
Oh, speaking of that, I noticed this happened this week or last week. X made a big change that I do not like.
Okay.
X just changed this so that the For You tab instead of the Following You tab is the default. If you open a new tab, like in your browser, it'll start you on For You. If you refresh it, it starts you on For You. For You is broken. And you know how much I love Elon Musk? Elon, if I could say 3 words to Elon, it would be For You broken. For You is the rage bait. For You shows you that's where all this racism and anti-Semitism, and no, it's not just because I'm a racist and an anti-Semite and it's recommending me things I want to see. No, it is the algorithm has been broken by whatever forces are conspiring against our nation and our souls.
The forces of Elon Musk,
and it
probably.
Is on. I don't know that he's I think he's being duped by it. Fix it. For You is broken. Or it's now the default. It's broken so bad.
It is
so
terrible.
Bad.
It's terrible.
It's unusably bad.
This is very true.
Yes. Next up, Democrats had a busy year in 2025 with some big wins. Cap off the year. We'll tell you what's in store for them coming up. Republicans have largely dominated the headlines in 2025, from DOGE to tariffs to Trump's immigration crackdown.
But while Democrats may have taken a backseat in the news, they've had a busy year too. Just 3 months after their 2024 election loss, Democrats kicked off the new year with another election, this time for their national party leadership. Ken Martin ran away with that race, with David Hogg and Pennsylvania State Representative Malcolm Kenyatta winning roles as vice chairs. But almost immediately, there was tension. Just weeks into his tenure, Hogg was openly critical of party leadership, including Martin, and even pledged to help primary incumbent Democrats whom he saw as ineffective. Of course, in June, Hogg was effectively ousted from his position after a new vice chair vote was called. That was over a procedural issue, and then Hogg, declined to run again.
Amidst all that drama, Democrats in Washington made it their mission after 2024 to find new, eye-catching ways to resist Donald Trump. Bernie Sanders and AOC kicked off their Fighting the Oligarchy tour in February and March, and saw some Democratic lawmakers boycotting Trump's address to Congress, while others held signs to show their disapproval. Shows of resistance against Trump's immigration policies were popular among Democrats over the summer. You may remember New Jersey Democrat LaMonica McIver was arrested outside an ICE facility in Newark for allegedly assaulting agents. That kicked off a series of lawmakers demanding oversight of ICE facilities. And then several Democrats made the trip to El Salvador to protest the deportation of Kilmar Abrego Garcia to the country's notorious mega prison, CCOT. Gavin Newsom also drew some attention, launching his new strategy of mimicking Trump to troll the administration on social media. That was then taken a step further during Texas's efforts to redistrict when the governor vowed to act in kind to cancel out Republican gains.
But perhaps the most consequential move by Democrats this year came in October, when Senate Democrats refused to pass Republicans' continuing resolution for more than 40 days. The reasoning there, to save Affordable Care Act subsidies that were set to expire in the new year following the passage of Trump's so-called Big Beautiful Bill. Ultimately, 8 members of the Democratic caucus voted to end that shutdown. And that move received much criticism in the wake of the November elections. Those elections were, to put it mildly, a Democratic sweep. Newsom's redistricting plan passed, and Democratic candidates won handily in Virginia, New Jersey, and New York City, where Democratic socialist Zoran Mamdani won 4 out of the 5 city boroughs. Those wins carried over into December with a 13-point swing to the left in deep red Tennessee, and a big win in Miami, a city that has not had a Democratic mayor in nearly 30 years.
So, where do the Democrats go from here? To help us grill Niall on such matters is our good friend and Friday co-host of Rising, Amber Duke. Nice to see you, Amber.
Hey, y'all. Nice to see you, too.
Did you remember that there had been a government shutdown this year? Because I've already forgotten that. I'm like, that was this year?
I must admit, when you were running through all of those various Democratic big moments, I felt like it had been 4, maybe 8 years since a lot of those happened, particularly the DNC chair battle involving David Hogg. It's been a very consequential year, and yet at the same time, so much has happened that it's easy to forget. I'm kind of curious. My big question heading into the 2026 midterms is Democrats have moved away from these sort of quasi-cultural battles on things like immigration and DEI, and maybe we could even classify DOGE in that category. And they've really been harping on this affordability issue, which is one that is a weakness for Trump, right? Mm-hmm. His approval rating on the economy is very low. Will they be able to stay disciplined on that message and stay away from some of those more poisonous, toxic to the the voting electorate issues that they were really obsessed with earlier this year?
I am going to say yes, Amber, that they will be able to stay away from that. Now, we'll see if I'm right or not, but I think the desperation to win is part of the reason why they're likely to stay disciplined. I also think that there was actually a realization that some of those issues did cost the Democrats electorally in the 2024 elections. I mean, not to get too deep into the weeds of the trans issue again, but I do think there's a big difference even within that issue on talking about how people should be not discriminated against in the workplace or seeking living accommodation or so on, which many people support, versus the trans people in sports issue, where the public opinion is very, very different. But even aside from the specifics of that topic, I think that there is an awareness that some of those things hurt Democrats, and that there's still a lane to be populist and to be, frankly, angry about economic conditions that doesn't require an embrace of some of those more potentially electorally damaging social issues. I thought Robbie was going to ask me a question, but I've rendered him speechless.
I was just sorry. I was agreeing with you. I forgot. I didn't say out loud that I do think they're doing that. I read that. Did you see, Amber, and did you see, Niall, the Compact article this week about the hiring practices in academia and education and entertainment in like the 20 teens? And how woke it was, how demonizing of, frankly, the thrust of the piece was that this was very damaging for young white males, not for older and already established white males. That the editor of the thing, the director of the project, the tenured professor. Those people didn't have to compete against diversity and DEI, but people in entry-level positions in those fields did have to come up against the kind of crescendo of wokeness that took place from like 2014 to 2022. That does feel really, really dead to me, and it being dead will be good for Democrats.
We'll see.
Sorry,
I don't know,
Amber.
because I will say on one point, and this is really important in terms of when people ask, well, why are young men so right-wing? Why are they getting quote unquote radicalized? I think that article is a really good indicator of why that happened. But I'm not so sure that it's actually dead. I was talking to a friend who works in finance in a major city recently, and they said, yeah, it's less overt, right? People don't publicly admit anymore that they pass over young white men for positions, but there's still this very inculcated culture in major corporations that is very woke. Where there's still a feeling that you have to be really careful what you say, or you might get a trip to HR. There are people who are less than qualified who get second, third chances at their job because they come from a quote unquote protected class. So I think it's less overt and obvious. And there's been steps taken by the Trump administration to end that in the federal grant giving process. But I don't necessarily think that this is just gone or dead at this point, and it definitely could rear its ugly head again if Democrats get power back and decide that they want to take on the DEI fight again.
I would like to wander away from this politically perilous terrain for Democrats and talk about the fact that there will obviously be increasing heat on the 2028 potential presidential field. I mean, I think we're already seeing people making initial moves in that respect. We've spoken at various times about AOC in the recent weeks, and obviously Gavin Newsom's very central figure. I'm just wondering, particularly from your more conservative perspective, Amber, I think we've got about a minute left. Are there any Democratic candidates who you think would be more difficult for a Republican nominee to run against in a couple of years?
I do think AOC is a more likely general candidate than a lot of Republicans give her credit for. She's obviously very media savvy. She's really reframed her focus around the affordability, anti-oligarchy, sort of fighting the establishment position, and moved away from some of those woker issues, which gives her a lot of power in a post-Bernie party. I've also seen reporting that Gavin Newsom is facing attacks from some Democrats on a variety of issues, either for not being progressive enough, for being too progressive, for trying to boost his own profile outside of the Democratic establishment. So I'm just really curious to see how this primary shakes out in terms of, is this finally the moment where the DNC is no longer the power broker for who becomes the candidate? Are the progressives, is the Democratic base going to be able to overcome the previously insurmountable shackles that the DNC has put on the primary process?
We shall see. And coming up, I'm glad to say Amber will be staying with us. We will continue our conversation looking at what Republicans have in store for 2026. Stay with us.
And it's been quite the year for the Republican Party, to say the least. In January, President Trump was sworn in and issued a flurry of executive orders, 26 in total. Those orders range from immigration issues like ending birthright citizenship, designating specific cartels as foreign terrorist organizations, and pausing refugee admissions, to cultural issues like recognizing only two sexes and ending DEI in the federal government.
The president has issued 221 executive orders so far, but he has been met with some roadblocks. Various judges stepped in to temporarily halt some of Trump's initiatives. For instance, President Trump had invoked the Alien Enemies Act in March as justification to deport 137 alleged gang members to a prison in El Salvador. Judge James Boasberg ordered a pause on the operation and expressed concerns over due process. One of those men deported under the Alien Enemies Act was Kilmar Abrego Garcia. He had protected legal status that prevented him from being deported specifically to El Salvador, resulting in a judge ordering him to be brought back. In early December, Abrego Garcia was freed from immigration detention on a judge's order.
Other executive orders tied up in legal battles include a ban on birthright citizenship, a freeze or federal grants and loans, and of course, the big old tariff battle. Republicans in Congress also got in on the action, passing the president's so-called Big Beautiful Bill into law. In a nutshell, the bill extends tax cuts and phases in Medicaid cuts. The final House vote was 218 to 214, with 2 Republicans voting against it. Vice President J.D. Vance broke a 50-50 tie in the Senate.
When it came to off-year elections, Republicans performed poorly, to say the least. For the first time in almost 30 years, Miami elected a Democratic mayor. Democrats also won a right-leaning House district in Georgia that Trump had carried by 12 points. And Republicans also lost 2 gubernatorial races by wide margins in Virginia and New Jersey.
And of course, we got to mention an event that totally shocked the political world, the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Kirk was the founder and leader of Turning Point USA, a conservative activist group with chapters on college campuses all throughout the country. Kirk is credited playing a big part, huge part, in getting the youth vote out for Trump in 2024. The late Turning Point CEO was also a sort of glue that held together various factions of the right. It seems like we're now seeing just how important it was that he was serving in that role, considering how much conservative infighting has taken place since his tragic death.
So, after all that, what should Republicans be looking forward to and prioritizing in 2026? We are glad to turn back to our guest and friend, Amber Duke. So, Amber, where do you see things overall in the conservative movement kind of standing right now? I mean, there obviously are some divisions. There's also, I think, a pretty uphill climb, perhaps, to retain the House of Representatives for the Republican Party. But there are obviously some strengths, including in the kind of cultural moment that we were discussing in a previous block. How do you see the overall picture?
Things feel weird right now. I actually liken this moment to similarly as to how conservatives felt towards the end of Trump's first term. So around the summer of 2020 and onward to his attempt at re-election, where there's sort of this feeling of stagnation, of things getting a little bit silly, of Republicans and conservatives being unfocused. And it was clear after the assassination of Charlie Kirk that he played a much bigger role in keeping various factions of the movement together than people realized prior to his death. There's been a lot of infighting over the past few months. The Trump administration, just to focus on them for a second, I think kind of took for granted that they could come into office, they would have these hundreds of executive orders signed in the first couple of months and make a lot of big splashy moves. But over the previous 3 or 4 months, it seems like there hasn't been much movement at all. In fact, the Republican Party, instead of codifying some of these executive orders or some of Trump's policy agenda, are still fighting about Affordable Care Act subsidies with the Democrats. And so it feels very unfocused. In December, Trump decided to expand the Presidential Hall of Fame or Wall of Fame on the West Colonnade by adding these plaques below the pictures where they were basically just Truth Social posts put onto black and gold plaques. And this was the same day that he was supposed to give this big address to the nation, reorienting the administration towards focusing on questions of affordability and touting the first year wins. And so everything just feels a little bit distracted, unfocused. There's not a lot of message discipline. And realistically, the president has less than a year to effectuate his policy agenda if midterms go the way that all of the polls are anticipating. And so it seems every single second should be focused on charging ahead and continuing to rack up wins. And that isn't really happening.
And they have to be nervous, Amber, that the voters they brought in 2024, Trump making historic gains with minority voters, young people, young men, winning the popular vote over Kamala Harris with a kind of voter who has not been a reliable Republican voter, maybe wasn't even a Republican voter ever before. And how do you keep and hold on to that person? I think they're seeing troubling signs in some of these off, irregular elections, that Democrats very motivated to show up, vote against Republicans. Maybe there's a lot of people who are motivated to show up, vote for Trump, but Trump's not technically going to be on the ballot. And I think that's the biggest question the party faces, is how does it motivate those people newly brought into the party to show up on behalf of just Republicans generically, or on behalf of whoever the next leader of the Republican Party is, presumably J.D. Vance, but not Trump. That's the challenge.
Exactly. I mean, the new Republican Party is made up of low and mid-prop voters who are excited to show up for Trump, but really nobody else in the party. So when he's not on the ballot, things get really challenging. And to take your point on young voters who went for Trump in the 2024 election more than pretty much any other Republican in modern political history, there was a Rasmussen poll that came out in mid-December that showed that they're pretty dissatisfied with the way things are going. They actually feel that Trump has not done enough of the things that he promised on the campaign trail. And I think we're seeing this shift where the sort of boomer political test was, which president would you most like to get a beer with? And we saw that in 2016, right? Trump outpaced Hillary on that question, even though Trump doesn't drink. And it was I think a test of authenticity. People felt like Trump was really speaking his mind, speaking on behalf of forgotten voters. But now young voters are interested, I think, a little bit more in that 2008 Hillary Clinton campaign ad where she was talking about the 3 a.m. phone call, which is a question of competence, right? And efficiency and being there to get the job done. And when people are happy to, have memes and trolling, and they don't really care so much about Trump's personality if he's actually getting things done. And if the administration is at a point where they're kind of resting on their laurels, there's no big, new, bold ideas on affordability or housing, that could be a real difficult thing for them to overcome with young voters. Now, Trump did say in that address to the nation on December 17th that he was going to announce a big new housing policy in the new year. That could potentially be a game changer depending on what it is, but we haven't had really any hints about what exactly it is the Republicans want to do on that front. Previously, the message has been, we're deporting all of these illegal aliens who are driving up housing costs, and that's part of the puzzle, but it's not the whole answer, right? This is both a supply and a demand issue. If they can come up with a really creative solution for the rising mortgages, rising rent prices for young people who are really seeking the American dream, that would be one area in which I think they could help regain some of that popularity.
I agree. Something massive and maybe even out of the box thinking on affordability for young people or childcare costs for young people would be the game changer Republicans really need at this point. Amber Duke, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Up next, many U.S. adults are considering setting financial goals as their top New Year's resolution. We'll be right back after this. A survey by Ipsos reveals that U.S. adults who are 25 years or older are considering saving more money as their top New Year's resolution.
Polls show that 37% of Americans aged 25 or older with annual household incomes under $100,000 have or expect to have a New Year's resolution for 2026.
Among them, about 97% are considering New Year's resolutions with a financial component. About 70% say that saving more money is their top financial resolution. 49% say they resolve to spend less or reduce expenses. 39% strive to improve their credit score, and 35% want to pay off their debt or start a side hustle. Around 72% of those surveyed feel tracking financial goals helps keep them accountable. And 81% say that saving money feels like self-care. Another 70% feel that saving money gives them more freedom.
Around 48%, however, agree that enjoying life now is more important than saving for the future. So, Robbie, are you going to be New Year's resolutioning on your financial state of affairs? Is it going to be an addition to the suave fortune?
I don't think I really have a financially motivated New Year's resolution. My fiance is a very savings-minded individual, is very thrifty, probably more so than I am. It creates a little bit of friction every now and then. I'm like, the major constraint I have is time. We can't have more time. So I would rather spend more money to save time because I can't get At our old age, Niall, we can't get more time out of the day, so I'm okay spending money. You know, we should value the time you have and save time by not doom scroll. You know, I was saying pro AI things all day, but don't doom scroll social media, because that's a major time suck. I think that should be my New Year's resolution, to do that a little bit less so that I have more time to engage in work that I really enjoy, or just to do nothing or read a book or something.
Yeah.
How about you?
Well, so I don't generally overspend, but I just sort of tailor whatever my spending is to whatever my income is at that point. Like you, I tend, I think, to spend money on things that buy me time or buy me convenience. So I'm not someone who will make doing a certain task difficult for myself in order to save 10 or 15 bucks or 20 bucks or something. I generally will spend the money to make it easier for myself. That's different, I think, than having very extravagant or spendthrift ways where you live beyond your means. I'm of North of Ireland Protestant stock originally. We take a very dim view of extravagance in that way, and I tend not to, I'll spend money on things that make my life easier, but I don't sort of splurge money on crazy stuff.
Well, it would be foolish to save money now when Rising will one day be a global media empire.
Exactly.
And we'll be, quadrillionaires. We would feel silly about all the saving we did now.
We'll be living in our penthouses on the top floor of some Park Avenue.
Telescreen. Our holograms will be beamed into your homes as AI soon makes that possible.
Probably by the end of 2026, I imagine.
Be amazing.
Then we'll be. But, I do think that there's a genuine issue about being financial planning. I'm not particularly good at that. I'm not that much of a long-term thinker overall. So I get why people would want to be resolute about that. It's not a resolution I'll probably have myself.
You know that the IRS hurt me pretty bad.
I do. You have a big grievance about this.
I would, if I was not a libertarian already, I would be one now.
Think of all the money that has been taken out of your pocket and going to social good, Robbie, helping the less well off.
Well, we love to help the less well off, and we hope you and your family and everyone you care about and everyone we care about has a great 2026. I think it's going to be another great year, Niall. Thanks for watching. That does it for us on Rising Live, and look out for more exclusive YouTube content coming your way later today, and be sure to like, share, and subscribe to The Hill's YouTube channel so that you never miss any content. And of course, for those of you who like to listen while on the go, we're now available anywhere you can listen to podcasts. We will see you soon, my friends.